Let me tell you something right now that most folks don't even realize yet, but they will. Oh yes, they absolutely will, because there's something happening in this world today, and it's not loud, it's not flashy. It doesn't show up in headlines with capital letters or come with jets flying overhead. Nah, this ain't a movie trailer. This is something real, something slow, something deliberate, and it's something that came wrapped in a calm smile, a measured voice, and a passport full of strategy. You might have missed it, but while everybody else was out here talking big, making threats, flexing muscles, and trying to get on the front page of every newspaper in the world, one man was moving like a chess master. He wasn't trying to win the crowd. He was playing for the board, and the world is starting to catch on. Africa is starting to catch on, because that man, that silent strategist, is none other than India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Let me tell you, respect ain't something you demand. It's something you earn, and Jaishankar didn't walk into Africa asking for applause. He didn't show up demanding attention or bringing bribes. He brought something far more powerful, listening. He listened, he learned, and then he leaned in with wisdom, empathy, and strength. That's how you win in silence. That's how you win without noise. That's how you win respect. See, for decades, Africa has been treated like a chessboard. Big powers come and go, placing their pawns, setting up their queens, trying to dominate a continent that don't belong to anybody but its own people. And what did most of those powers do? They exploited, they extracted, they manipulated. But here comes India, led by a man who doesn't just understand geopolitics. He understands people. And when you understand people, you don't show up talking first. You show up listening. You show up offering a hand, not a fist. You show up offering partnerships, not dependencies. Let me break this down for you. Jaishankar knew the history. He knew that Africa's past was full of broken promises, full of exploitation, full of outsiders coming in, pretending to help but secretly setting traps. So instead of repeating that history, he rewrote the script. India under Jaishankar didn't come to Africa with conditions. They came with collaboration. They didn't show up saying, "Do this for us." They came saying, "Let's build this together." And Africa felt that. Oh, they felt it deep, because when someone treats you like an equal, when they show up with humility and strength, you remember that. You hold on to that. And suddenly, all those silent visits, all those strategic investments, all those educational partnerships, health programs, defense training modules, solar energy cooperatives, those weren't just deals on paper. They were promises kept. Now listen, this didn't happen overnight. This wasn't one speech, one summit, or one agreement. This was built brick by brick. It was built through trust. It was built when Indian doctors showed up in African villages with nothing but care in their hands. It was built when Indian engineers taught local communities how to build solar grids instead of selling them. It was built when Jaishankar stood on world stages and said, "Africa's voice matters," and then backed that up by giving African nations actual space to speak. You know what that is. That's not diplomacy. That's dignity. That's giving people the space to be heard. And I don't care where you're from or who you are. When someone gives you your dignity back, you don't forget it. You honor it, you respect it, and Africa has started honoring India in a way the West never saw coming. You know why this move was so powerful? Because it wasn't forced. India didn't come with a colonial legacy or a superiority complex. They came with shared struggle. They came with the memory of being colonized themselves. They knew what it meant to fight for independence, for identity, for self-reliance. So when India stood beside Africa, it wasn't symbolic. It was spiritual. It was a reminder that two civilizations, both ancient, both rich, both bruised by history, could rise again, together. Now let me tell you what else made Jaishankar's silent victory so impressive. He didn't just talk to presidents. He talked to people. Indian diplomats under his leadership made it a point to connect at the grassroots. Universities were built, scholarships were offered, agricultural support was extended. Indian startups started mentoring African entrepreneurs. That's soft power. That's how you win hearts without tanks. That's how you plant the flag of influence without planting a single soldier. And look, let's keep it real. China's been all over Africa. So has the U.S. But while they were building highways and ports, Jaishankar was building bridges, not physical bridges, emotional bridges, political bridges, human bridges. He was setting up language training centers, Ayurveda clinics, cultural festivals. He was letting Africa see India, not just the government, but the soul of India. That's a whole different level of power. That's power that doesn't need a microphone. That's power that doesn't scream. It whispers, but that whisper gets carried by the wind from Cape Town to Cairo, from Nairobi to Lagos, and that whisper has now become a conversation, because African leaders are realizing that India is not here to dominate. They're here to elevate. And when you elevate others, your own stature rises without saying a word. That's exactly what happened. You know how you know a man is winning when others start copying his playbook. Suddenly you got Western powers saying, we need to rethink our strategy in Africa. You got China adjusting its tone. You got world leaders scratching their heads asking, how did India pull this off? And all the while, Jaishankar's just out there, shaking hands, giving interviews, walking calmly, never shouting, never boasting, just executing. It's almost poetic how silent strength wins the loudest applause. It's not about who yells the most. It's about who listens the best. It's about who moves with purpose, not noise. And let me tell you, this is India's move. This is Jaishankar's move, and the world better pay attention. See, Africa is waking up to a new dawn, and in that dawn, they're not looking to their old colonizers for leadership. They're not leaning on global institutions that talk equality but act with arrogance. No, they're looking toward New Delhi. They're looking at India and saying, that's a partner we can trust. Not because India has all the answers, but because India asks the right questions, because India respects sovereignty, honors culture, and shares its tools instead of wielding them. You want to know what real leadership looks like. It looks like showing up when the cameras are off. It looks like building water systems in rural areas where no media is watching. It looks like teaching coding in a school without electricity and promising to bring light before promises of software. It looks like giving without expectation. That's the India Africa sees today. That's the India Jaishankar helped shape. And let me say this, there's a spiritual rhythm to what's happening, because what Jaishankar understands better than most is this: power rooted in pride will crumble, but power rooted in principle will endure. And India's principle has always been Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. When you treat Africa like family, you don't exploit, you empower. Now here's the kicker: Jaishankar didn't do all this to get headlines. He didn't care if you clapped. He cared if it worked. He didn't ask for admiration. He earned respect because he wasn't trying to be liked. He was trying to be right, and being right, being respectful, being reliable, that earns more trust than any billion-dollar loan or defense deal. And now the results are rolling in. Trade between India and Africa is booming. Political alliances are strengthening. Defense ties are expanding. Africa's supporting India on global platforms. And most importantly, Africans are saying this out loud: India is different. That's not just a compliment, that's a verdict. That's the truth being spoken by a continent that's seen enough to know the difference between a visitor and a partner. You see, silence is a language too. And Jaishankar speaks it fluently, because silence doesn't mean weakness. It means calculation. It means focus. It means letting your actions speak louder than your words. And while others were talking big, Jaishankar was building big. While others were promising, he was delivering. While others were treating Africa like a business opportunity, he was treating it like a brotherhood. Let me tell you what that leads to. That leads to influence that cannot be bought. That leads to relationships that can't be broken. That leads to a reputation that walks into a room before you do. And right now, Jaishankar walks into every room with the silent applause of a continent that finally feels seen. You know what's powerful? When your power doesn't make others feel small, but lifts them up instead. That's the soft power India is mastering right now. And under Jaishankar's quiet, methodical leadership, that power is reshaping the global south. It's giving voice to the voiceless. It's saying to the forgotten, we see you. And it's making the loudest nations in the world realize that the most powerful diplomacy doesn't come from domination, but from dignity. So let the world keep shouting. Let the cameras chase noise. Let the superpowers keep spinning their wheels in the mud of arrogance. Meanwhile, Jaishankar will keep walking, quietly, calmly, but with every step Africa listens. And with every partnership, Africa rises, and one day soon, the world's going to look around and realize something. It wasn't the loudest voice in the room that changed the game. It was the one that listened first, planned next, and spoke last. That's how Jaishankar won Africa's respect, not with fanfare, not with force, but with something stronger, with wisdom, with humility, with heart, and in a world full of noise, that silence is deafening. It marked the birth of India's assertive military doctrine backed by innovation, establishing silent, consistent presence instead of short-term media spectacles. That's where the real power lies, and that's exactly what India has been doing under the steady, calculated hand of S. Jaishankar. See, when we talk about diplomacy and foreign policy, most people imagine flashy headlines, grand summits, red carpets, and viral photo ops. But the truth is, those things don't build relationships. They don't plant roots. They don't leave lasting impressions. What leaves an impact, what actually shifts the ground beneath global alliances, is quiet consistency, presence that doesn't demand attention, but commands respect simply by showing up and staying there. India didn't just roll into Africa with speeches and exit with promises. No, India arrived and stayed year after year, minister after minister, quietly building not just projects but trust, not just infrastructure but intimacy. They didn't come in with helicopters full of reporters or entourages meant to impress. They came with professionals, with educators, with engineers, with cultural ambassadors, with solar panels, rice varieties, medical units, and scholarship programs. They came with intent, not to impress but to integrate, not to dominate but to empower. This presence wasn't loud, it wasn't viral, it didn't need to be because it was real. Now think about how the rest of the world treats Africa. The West flies in, takes a picture with the president, signs a few checks, and flies back out. China comes in with a suitcase full of contracts and builds infrastructure. But strings are always attached, and sometimes those strings become chains. Meanwhile, India doesn't just visit, it invests. In people, in conversations, in the cultural roots of each African nation. Indian delegations don't disappear after the ceremony. They stick around. They follow up. They return year after year, building on what was started, never rushing the process but always moving forward. This is a different kind of power. It's not aggressive. It's not made for television. It's not headline bait. But it works, because over time, people start to notice who's really standing beside them. When the cameras leave and the dust settles, who's still there? That's the question Africa has been asking, and more, the answer is India. India's still here, India's still listening, India's still building. That kind of presence plants roots deeper than any press release ever could. Take India's presence in African education. While other countries fund temporary training programs or pop-up institutions with branding all over the place, India quietly increased its scholarships for African students to study in Indian universities. No fanfare, no big media moment, just students coming in, graduating, returning home with new skills and a positive experience of India etched into their lives. That's long-term strategy. That's legacy-making work. Because those students become the next diplomats, scientists, business leaders, and policymakers, and they remember who helped them without asking for anything in return. The same strategy applies to healthcare. While others drop off donations and stage photo ops, Indian medical professionals go to remote African villages and provide long-term assistance. Telemedicine initiatives link Indian doctors to African patients. Indian pharma companies offer affordable medicines. Indian hospitals open up training partnerships with African healthcare institutions. And all of this happens quietly. No flashing lights, no dramatic unveiling. Just consistent, thoughtful engagement, the kind that wins loyalty and respect without asking for it. Let's not forget the military partnerships. Most would think military cooperation requires loud demonstrations, joint exercises with fighter jets flying over and flags waving. But India's military diplomacy in Africa isn't about showcasing force, it's about transferring knowledge. Indian officers train African officers in peacekeeping missions. They collaborate on counter-insurgency strategy. They co-develop frameworks for maritime security. This is not a power play, it's a partnership play. A strategic presence that doesn't make headlines but builds strong defense ties, built on mutual growth and operational trust. Now, let's talk about infrastructure. China builds the stadiums, Europe funds the highways, but India builds the software for digital governance. They help African nations modernize their taxation systems. They offer low-cost fintech solutions to help governments increase transparency. That's not just infrastructure, it's the digital foundation for sovereignty. And while others plaster their names on bridges, India helps Africans build the blueprints for independence. No ribbon-cutting ceremonies, no grandiose branding, just real results. You can see it in the cultural exchange programs too. Indian cultural centers don't just promote Bollywood movies or Indian festivals. They create space for African and Indian artists to collaborate. Dance, music, visual arts, they become bridges, not broadcasts. It's not about selling India. It's about connecting cultures. It's not about putting on a show. It's about building a community. That kind of connection doesn't fade after the party ends. It stays, it lingers, it grows, and here's the thing. India's soft power move is not just passive, it's layered with intent. Every educational partnership, every infrastructure deal, every military training program, every cultural dialogue is a brick in the foundation of a new geopolitical order. But instead of announcing it on international stages or tweeting about it in all caps, India does it the old-fashioned way, by showing up, by staying in the room, by being the reliable partner when everyone else disappears. It's a slow burn, but it's a fire that spreads. African nations start to look at India differently, not just as a friend, but as a mirror, a post-colonial country that found its way, a massive democracy that still honors diversity, a country that faced global skepticism and grew anyway. Africa doesn't just see India as another investor, they see India as an example, and that kind of influence, unspoken, unforced, is the most powerful kind of all. This isn't a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It's more like farming. You show up with seeds, you till the soil, you water every day, even when the sun's too hot or the rain doesn't come. You stay consistent. You stay committed, and eventually a harvest comes. That's what India's doing in Africa, farming trust, farming credibility, farming relevance, and that's something the flash and bang diplomacy of other powers can never replicate. It's not that India doesn't understand spectacle, they do. They know how to put on a show when needed, but in Africa they chose patience over performance. They chose depth over drama. They chose legacy over likes. And that's where Jaishankar's leadership shines, because he knows that in the global south, memory runs deep. People remember who came with weapons and who came with wisdom. They remember who spoke over them and who listened. They remember who left and who stayed. And when the time comes for alliances to be tested, when votes are needed at the UN, when support is required in multilateral negotiations, when someone needs to stand up and say, "We believe in India," you'll see Africa standing tall, not because they were told to, but because they want to. Because India didn't just build deals, they built trust. They didn't just visit, they became part of the neighborhood. The beauty of this entire approach is how unshakable it becomes. When you win someone's trust with silence, with consistency, with presence, they don't abandon you when the next flashy guest arrives. They don't drop you for the next trend. Because your value isn't rooted in entertainment, it's rooted in engagement. India has quietly rooted itself in the African story not as a benefactor, not as a controller, but as a fellow journeyer. That kind of bond can't be cut by noise. There's another layer here, one that speaks to India's own history. India knows what it feels like to be colonized, to be used, to be ignored. That experience has informed their foreign policy in ways no textbook can capture. India doesn't come into Africa to teach lessons. It comes to learn together, and that humility, that recognition of shared struggle is magnetic. It makes space for honest dialogue, for peer-level collaboration, for mutual progress. That's not soft power, that's spiritual power. That's the kind of power that rewrites history books. Even the private sector reflects this presence. Indian companies expanding into Africa are not just profit-chasing. They're opening offices, hiring local talent, and integrating deeply into communities. Whether it's telecom giants like Airtel, pharmaceutical companies, or IT firms, the message is the same. We're here to stay. We're not outsourcing this. We're building this with you. And when a company plants roots like that, it tells people, we believe in your future. Let's also talk about timing. India didn't wait until the world started panicking about Africa's demographic explosion. They didn't wait until African markets became gold mines for foreign capital. They didn't wait for the hype. They arrived before the storm. That means when the scramble for influence picks up pace, India's already inside. They've already been having the conversations. They've already earned the goodwill. So when the next power shows up asking for access, they'll find the door already held open. By India, it's subtle but brilliant. Because it works in silence, it accumulates strength without alerting the competition. It plays the long game. While others play checkers, India's playing chess with a strategy that doesn't make noise, but makes history. Jaishankar didn't need a viral moment to win. He needed patience, foresight, and a presence that didn't fade after the photos were taken. That's how you win without ever having to say you're winning. That's how you lead without ever stepping on a stage. That's how you dominate a narrative without ever speaking into a microphone. That's how you turn a whisper into the loudest voice in the room without even raising your voice at all.